I'm delighted to welcome again Professor David Flint. Professor Flint is an emeritus professor of law at UTS, having read law and economics at the universities of Sydney, London and the Sorbonne. You might recall that when he was last on the program, he indicated that law professors can nominate someone for the Nobel Peace Prize. Professor Flint and colleagues, Professors Zimmerman, Moens and James Allen, nominated Donald Trump for what he has done in the quest for world peace. Trump has presided over peace deals in the Middle East between Israel, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. He's taken action to restrain and eliminate the activities of terrorists within the region. He's rebuilt the American military as a deterrent against aggression. However, the Nobel Peace Prize at the weekend was awarded to the World Food Programme for its effort to combat hunger and improve conditions for peace in conflict areas. Professor Flint joins me. Professor Flint, good evening. Thank you for your time. Not a word about Donald Trump, the World Food Programme.
No, indeed, but the provisions of the Nobel Peace Prize relate to the year ahead. And what we've nominated, and we could only do this, is to nominate him for the 21 prize.
Good on you. Good on you.
So there's still a possibility.
OK.
And as he develops his next term, he will no doubt achieve even more peace in the world.
Good on you, I hope so. We're 3 weeks tomorrow from the presidential election. You think there are 3 things that indicate the Democrats are afraid. So firstly, what do you make of this barrage of polls and stories that tell us that Trump has gone?
Well, if you're going to fake a poll, as many are, surely you make it plausible. And the idea that Biden is going to win by 16 points, 16%, which has never happened in Australia, I don't think it's ever happened in any presidential election, is just absolutely ridiculous. If you're going to fake something, so make it plausible. Most of these polls, or many of these polls, are polls done by the media, the mainstream media, and most of the mainstream media in America has been campaigning relentlessly against Trump over 4 years, particularly over that ridiculous Russian collusion.
Well, what about this? What about this blatant lie that President Trump labelled in France dead soldiers as losers and suckers? Just for the benefit of my viewers, Donald Trump had cancelled a visit to a war cemetery in France near Paris. He cancelled the visit because of the weather. John Bolton is a former United States ambassador to the United Nations and an enemy of Donald Trump. As a Trump hater, Bolton would have supported the story, but he didn't. The sources were anonymous and unnamed, but it didn't matter, David Flint, did it?
No, not at all. If that had happened in Australia, that editor would be before the Press Council. If it were on radio or television, they'd be before ACMA, and there'd be a lot of trouble over that, because this was a complete abdication of any sense of ethics in the media. You just don't publish something like that without some evidence. And as you say, Bolton was the perfect person. Goldberg, the editor of The Atlantic, didn't even bother to try to contact any of those people present. And there were military records which showed it was a military decision not to fly the helicopter in such weather. It was very dangerous.
Mail-out voting. Now, I spoke last time about this mail-out fraud. How do you safeguard against this? There are stories about ballot harvesting in the Minneapolis district, represented by a Democrat, Ilhan Omar, and it's alleged that paid workers illegally gathered absentee ballots from elderly Somali immigrants, filled them out for Democrats, and that's it. Is the election result vulnerable to mass voter frauds?
It is vulnerable, not as vulnerable as Australian voting is, because it's not as centralised as Australian is. It is decentralised into the various states. But the important thing is that the Supreme Court will have the final say. The Supreme Court will, of course, by that time have an additional real judge on the court. So I think we can expect a good decision.
So I was going to ask you that. Do you think Amy Coney Barrett will be confirmed before the election? And just explain to us how significant you think that is for America and the world.
Well, the Supreme Court has always been a very difficult institution. It took power it was never intended to have. It was supposed to be. The American Constitution was essentially to be like the British Constitution, which is unwritten. And the legal part, the final Court of Appeal, was to be like the House of Lords and not to have the powers it claimed subsequently to have. And that's always been a disaster. One of the terrible decisions taken before the Civil War, which was to say that slaves were still slaves even if they got to a free territory, and that they could never vote and that black people could never vote. That decision of the Supreme Court really probably triggered the Civil War. And there were a lot of other decisions which were taken. The court has, over a number of years, decided to exercise a legislative role or to change the Constitution. Yeah. The most famous case which involved this was Roe v. Wade, yes. The decision to invent that there is a right to abortion in the Constitution. Really, this is a matter for each of the states to have their own laws on this. Absolutely. There's no such thing as a constitutional right to abort, and of course this has been delivered and developed, and it's thought that if more radical judges were appointed to the court who make the Constitution mean what they want it to mean rather than what it was intended to mean, there will be further radical changes to the American Constitution.
Professor Flint, if I could just say, there's only two candidates here, Trump and Biden, in a real world, that's it. Now, Biden thought Antifa was an idea. He wouldn't, in that debate, defend law and order. He wouldn't speak out against police defunding. He couldn't name one police union which had endorsed him. He disowned the Green New Deal, the far-left agenda, so whether the left will turn out to vote for him is another thing. And it's true, isn't it, that Joe Biden's son, Hunter, received a hell of a lot of money from the wife of the mayor of Moscow. Are all these issues going to resonate with the voter, do you think?
One of the problems is, of course, the mainstream media, which will just not mention these. But the thing is, these are very important issues that you raised, and he is certainly not the candidate which should be the person being considered as President of the United States. The Democratic Party is not the Democratic Party which we knew. It's not the party of Roosevelt and Kennedy and Truman. No. It's been captured by the far left.
Yes, it has.
That is the dangerous thing. Yeah. And if he gets in, he obviously won't be ruling. There will be people, there'll be people far more extreme than he is.
A prisoner of the left.
And I think they've shown that they effectively are in alliance with these people who are going around looting and wrecking cities.
Which affects the whole world, of course. We've all got a stake in this. Now, before you go, is it true that the moderator of that first debate, because Donald Trump said, well, I was debating two people, Chris Wallace, is a registered Democrat?
He is indeed. And as you know, he asked that question in such a way about white supremacists as though Trump had never said anything about it before. Will you tonight, Mr. President, he insisted. And then as Trump said yes, 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 he still went to the end of the question and then repeated it again. He asked him the same question 4 years before when he was moderating a Republican primary, and he got exactly the same answer. He knew, he knows that Trump is very much against white supremacy. Trump is very much a man who...
And he did say, he said that in the debate anyway, he said he's opposed to all sorts of extremists. So just to be finally, before you go, do you think there's a leakage of black and other non-white votes to Trump? And are there people who'd be Trump voters but may not tell the pollsters? So I suppose I'm saying, how do you read now the pro-Trump black vote? How do you read where the balance exists at the moment?
Well, a good poll, which was one of the closest in 2016, Rasmussen, shows that the black vote is now at least double. It's more than double. It was in 2016, as is the Hispanic vote, as is the Asian vote. And there is also the significant issue of the shy Trump voters. Now, it's very understandable that if you're going to have your tyres slashed, your windows smashed, threatened with assault, sacked from your job, you're not going to tell somebody who's just come onto the phone that you're going to vote for Trump. But there are ways that some of the very good pollsters have found out how to do it. And one way is to ask, well, would you be embarrassed if people knew how you were going to vote? And Trump voters claim to be very embarrassed, whereas Biden voters aren't at all embarrassed because they know nothing's going to happen. And there's also the question which has been questioned by Gallup, and that is, who do you think will win? And overwhelmingly, whatever their own opinions are, the overwhelming answer there is we think that Trump will win the election. So I would not be worried too much about the polls.
Good on you. Good to talk to you. Sorry.
Good.
Go on.
As we need not be about some of the Australian polls. I remember in 1999 we were being told we were going to become a republic, and we had everybody against us, the mainstream media and so on. we had a national vote and every state voted to keep the Constitution.
Good to talk to you. Always good to talk to you. That's Professor David Flint. I have to say, I hope that Trump reminds the voters of America of what he said at the Mount Rushmore speech, where he condemned what he described as a merciless campaign to wipe out our history, defame our heroes, erase our values and indoctrinate our children. The election is all about us. Those values we need to have asserted in the leader of the world's democracies. It'll be interesting to see if that does happen.